And we are live. Hello, good morning, everybody, or rather, good afternoon to everybody who is joining us. I am joined by the lovely Danny Wareham and Sandra Thompson this morning as we talk about the more human side of AI, especially given the fact that every single conversation topic we're hearing about, I think across every single industry at the moment, is about how best to utilize AI and how much operational efficiency and all of that sort of good stuff that it gives. But actually, the transformation of the agent role is also on people's mind as well. And so I decided to get Danny and Sandra together, who have kindly offered to contribute to this masterclass to give some ideas and some techniques about what we can do to look after our agents and consider things like, hey, do we need to hire for emotional intelligence? So, Sandra, do you want to give your first intro?
Sure, thank you. So I have been working with emotional intelligence for quite a while now. I was a student of it probably 27 years ago when I wrote a dissertation all about how organizations can get better culture when they have emotional intelligence working in parallel. So fast forward to now, I'm a customer experience consultant. I try to help people understand what empathy really is, and I try to bring the human in as much as possible. So yeah, variety of clients, lots of coaching, lots of training, and still learning. So I'm looking forward to learning from Danny, because he's the one who knows this stuff.
I'm not quite so sure about that. My name's Danny. I'm an organizational psychologist, and I believe that happy bees make tasty honey. If we have the right structure, the right support, the right leadership, the right culture, then performance becomes a side effect. But unfortunately, most people, most organizations, and most businesses focus on the honey first. So what's our EBITDA? What's our earnings per share? What's our output? What's our profit? And sometimes the kind of bees and the hive itself kind of get forgotten. So my specialty is kind of split between two areas. One is social dynamics, so kind of culture and employee engagement, and how do people interact purposefully. And the second is personality, with a particular interest in narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellism, which is intriguing to me because we tend to hire for that and promote for that in our leadership positions. So I'm very interested to learn more about the softer side from Sandra and Kerry. We always have fantastic, I won't say arguments, discussions.
Debates.
Debates as well.
That's what we want, a debate.
Exactly. It takes many flowers to make a garden. So I'm looking forward to this.
Do you know what? The thing that annoys me the most is when you disagree with somebody and someone, oh, have you got this big problem? Like, no, I disagree with Patrick all day, every day. We've been together for 5 years. Like, it's fine to have disagreements, and it's the area that you learn, right? If you live in an echo chamber where everybody shares the same opinion, you're not really going to grow. But one of the big things that, of course, everyone's talking about is AI, and whether they've already started using it in a big way in contact center or have got a specific use case that they've used it for. Expansion is on the agenda because they see, right, it can save X amount of costs, we can reduce headcount, etc., reduce the wrap time. But it means that, of course, naturally, that means calls are more complex when they need human intervention. And usually that means emotionally charged, a real issue, a moment that matters. So does that mean that we now need to focus on hiring emotionally intelligent advisors?
Sandra, do you want to jump in?
Thank you. I would like to start with saying that I think it's a willingness to learn. I think it's probably hiring for people who have a growth mindset. So people who have a certain level of self-awareness, they're willing to try something new. They see every day and every opportunity as more positive and growth and progress. I think you don't need to hire for EQ. I think you need to hire for the right mindset and the right attitude. And the second part of that is, and again, this is just from my experience, from how I see the world. depending on the age of the individuals that you're recruiting, some people have more experience of life, which means that they might be more emotionally intelligent because they've had different stimulus to inform how they see the world, how they manage their emotions. So that's why I probably wouldn't go for recruiting with EQ, because that might take a certain demographic out of the equation, but definitely for growth mindset.
So a bit of our first agree and disagree. So I agree 100% with Sandra on self-awareness. For me, EQ, EI, development in general comes down to know thyself. When are you at your best? What takes a little bit more kind of work? So, for example, I'm not particularly organized. I'm much better being flexible and adaptable and creative and taking abstract learnings from other areas and putting them together. When I have to be structured and organized, it takes more mental load and it exhausts me. So I tend to either procrastinate and avoid it. I'll go down a Wikipedia rabbit hole and learn new stuff because I like that. Or I have to kind of put my big boy pants on a Friday. I have 2 hours blocked out, and that's when I do my admin and so on. Or I delegate it. I have a VA who helps with my scheduling and so on. So first, the self-awareness of when am I at my best and what kind of trips me up. Absolutely agree with Sandra. The growth mindset is an interesting one because growth mindset is better than fixed mindset is a fixed mindset statement. If you play it through. And for me, growth mindset is one of my Achilles heels. That always wanting to learn, always wanting to challenge, always being creative, always being innovative, that comes more naturally. I really struggle with the fixed mindset stuff of getting stuff done. It's all well and good having the ideas, but somebody needs to implement it and bring some pragmatism to the party. And if we create environments where we can recognize the strengths and the pitfalls that both of those sort of mindsets can bring, yes, we need innovation. Yes, we need to try things, but we also need to get them over the line and implement them too. So what's your thoughts on that, Sandra? It's not quite agree, but not quite disagree either.
So I think I need to go back to the work of Carol Dweck, because I understood mindset or growth mindset to be about your resilience to bounce back, the fact that you don't need to stay in the same mindset of not being able to do something. So I think I didn't see it as someone who's flighty and doesn't get stuff done, but I do see it as someone who has the propensity for personal growth. And the reason why I say that is because my perception of growth mindset is I have met individuals who are, I'm doing it this way, it's the way it's always been done, and that's totally fine by me. And they seem a bit like that. It doesn't really matter what they really are, because my perception is set that it's that, because they don't necessarily, and massive judgments here and massive generalizations, health warning, they don't feel comfortable being in the curious space of being a bit vulnerable because they might not be right. So that's my interpretation of what growth mindset is. But I'm intrigued by the way that you've described it. So I need to go back and reframe that.
I love that description, Sandra. That and again, it links with that self-awareness. So if people are more comfortable in the I know what I like and I like what I know, for me, there's nothing inherently wrong in that. If you've got the awareness of, can I be vulnerable, and is the avoidance of trying new things an avoidance behavior because you don't want to show your soft underbelly because I'm not comfortable with being vulnerable?
Yeah.
Or is it because you're very much a stick in the mud and the tried and tested ways, and that's it? And I think we've got, I don't like the word synergy, but we've definitely got some synergy in the conversation there. That I agree. Now that you've explained your views on growth mindset, I agree. It's, are you comfortable trying new things? And as leaders and organizations, for me, it's how do you create the environment where people can feel that they have that vulnerability, that they can choose to be vulnerable should they wish to.
And that, I think, is one of the key areas where individuals who have the skill of emotional intelligence, who are authentic and brilliant empathy, empaths,
Mhm.
I think sometimes because they've been beaten so many times and we brought back to the rules, they become, it withers away, and they become more apathetic, and then they leave. So so I think that there's definitely something interesting around what I would venture to call psychological safety, that they can go to that space and practice their skill. And the final thing I wanted to say on that is, I think we still do need a fixed mindset character here and there, because they're kind of steady rocks, as it were. But I think that because every day is completely different, every scenario customers bring is completely different, and there is so much incredible uncertainty. If you have a growth mindset, it's possible that you will still continue to learn through the ebbs and flows of all of those wonderful, disastrous opportunities that exist every day, because we just don't know what's around the corner.
Again, completely agree. Sorry, Kerry.
I was going to say there has been a lot of information there and a million questions that have popped into my head at the same time. So thanks, already filled with good content. But if we were to take it back slightly a step, because Danny and I had a conversation before about this, about emotional intelligence and dividing roles to determine how much maybe emotional intelligence you would need for certain roles, i.e. a live chat email scenario versus a telephone, for example. And I know you said there, Sandra, that, typically people with more lived experience tend to have a higher degree of emotional intelligence just because of that lived experience. So is there a way do you need more emotional intelligence for some roles, agent roles within the contact center than others? And can it be something that's taught for people coming through?
Shall I start with that, Danny? Would you like to start with that?
I will always defer to you first. I'll jump in if you like. My view is that emotional intelligence for me has a few different facets, but the first is, who are you? A lot of emotional intelligence conversations tend to be about reading other people's emotions and responding to it. But actually, for me, it starts with, what are your emotions? When I'm stressed, I become a fantasist. My car light came on, my engine light came on. The first thing that went through my head is, let's get a new car. And that's a rational decision for me, because the car's 4 years old. Maybe I can get an EV. But to everybody else, it's an irrational response. Why don't you just pay for have it diagnosed? So emotional intelligence for me starts with know yourself. And one of the reasons I feel that if you've got more lived experience, it's not necessarily that you've been through more experiences around others. It's that you're more aware of who you are at your core when you're at your best and what kind of derails you. So being more aware of yourself is a superpower. Does it mean that the transactional roles within contact centers require different levels of EQ? There may be an argument for that. For example, if there are more emotionally charged or complex issues, so a bereavement team might be an obvious cliched answer. If you've had more lived experience of dealing with people who have been through bereavement, if you've been through bereavements yourself, then you may be more naturally empathetic. But just because you're young and have had less experiences of that, if you know yourself how you respond, if you know what kind of triggers you, then actually you can add just as much to those conversations as somebody that's got 60 years of lived experience.
Yeah. So I think that's the point, isn't it? It's to do with your socialization. It's to do with how you've interpreted experiences from quite a young age. So you might have labeled certain experiences as bad or good or indifferent or whatever it might be. But the experience bit is all to do with some stuff that Lisa Feldman Barrett talks about. She's a neuroscientist over in the States, and she talks about how when you read things, when you go to the theatre, or when you travel, or when you meet new groups, or when you're exposed to all of these things, one, to your point, Danny, it helps you know yourself. But secondly, it expands the lexicon, it expands the range of words that you can use to describe how you're feeling. And it also gets you to be more particular in getting into some of the subtleties of how you're feeling. So you can actually start to pinpoint a bunch of expressions that are far more sophisticated than I'm fine, or it's good, or I feel okay, or whatever it might be. So I think that your ability to receive all of those signals that you get, whether that's on chat or on the phone or whatever it is, and the speed at which those signals happen, I think those that are more emotionally intelligent than others might fare well, particularly from a resilience point of view, because they'll know themselves and then they'll have some techniques on managing themselves. But overall, I think that we must remember that it's not like a badge. You've got emotional intelligence, nice one. It's a case of you can active listen, or you might know yourself, but you might not know how to manage your emotions, or you might know yourself and you might be able to manage your emotions, but your social awareness is not that brilliant, or the way that you manage your relationships still isn't that brilliant. You know, Goleman's model, which I bleat on about, has got 12 things in it. And so, you know, then to Danny's point, self-awareness is first, self-management is second, social intelligence, which has empathy in it, is third. And then the final one is the continual refinement of how you relate to people, how you influence people, how you're brilliant in teams. So I'm definitely still, you can ask the people in this household, still learning how to be more emotionally intelligent. I know it practically, I know it from a theory, but I wouldn't say that I've mastered it. Definitely not. I'm still learning.
And I think we all are. I think we all have that growth mindset when it comes to emotional intelligence and still learning.
And I guess you can be really emotionally intelligent as a whole in general, and then in certain stressful situations, you change. I know when the kids are both yelling at me and then somebody cuts me up as I'm driving along, I'm not, hey, hello, this is fine. I get really annoyed.
Our stress goes somewhere. It always goes somewhere.
But there's another thing in there, Kerry, though, that's really important for everyone on this call now to realise, is that being emotionally intelligent doesn't mean being ultra nice or ultra kind. Absolutely, it does not mean that. But it does mean that people like you, they feel trust towards you, they respect you, and that helps in any role anyone has got, whether they're answering a phone or they're in the back office or wherever they are. If you can create that rapport with others, then that's a more harmonious workplace, I think.
And I think when I talk to candidates, particularly at leadership level, and they talk about the leaders that they work with, they always talk about somebody with a high EQ that is what they respect and the type of person they like to work with, who gives them psychological safety. And sometimes they go, the worst thing is when somebody is aware of the fact that they can be, you know, quite mean in certain situations and really nice, and it kind of flips from one to the other. What is EQ in comparison, and how does it differ from emotional intelligence? Or is it the same thing?
So what we know is that there are 15 intelligences by a chap called Howard Gardner. I think that's his name. 15 intelligence, of which plant, animal, artificial, all of them sit in that space. Now, I understand EQ to be emotional intelligence, but there's a really interesting school of thought, and Danny's probably well in this space already. I'm still learning about it, right? But the spiritual intelligence bit, what consciousness is. And when we think about what consciousness is, and I have to say that slowly because I normally get my teeth stuck in it, that is likely to be changing what emotional intelligence is in the future. Once the neuroscientists can give us more evidence of this thing that everyone's arguing about, because no one can put their finger on it properly, but we know there's something about being in the physical presence of another human, being in a gathering of humans, watching someone's facial expression, being in the company of others. We know there's something, it's the conscious state. So I suppose in answer to your question, from my point of view, EQ and emotional intelligence is the same thing. Emotional intelligence is one of 15. We need to be thinking more about how this EQ evolves to represent the difference we are as humans from the AI. That's what I'd like to, that's what I think I've finished.
And this is really fascinating. Hi to the dog, by the way, Kerry.
Yes, thanks for catching that one. Do you know what? The worst thing is he's not even spotted anyone out of the window. He's just lay on the sofa and thought, I'll have a little howl.
He's having a sing-song.
Yeah.
He's talking about his animal intelligence. That's what he's trying to say.
I really am intelligent.
It's one of the things purely coincidentally that's just flashed through my head. So we have to be kind of cognizant. This is still a relatively new field. It was only in the 70s. Hans Eysenck, who's big in the personality psychology world, was convinced there was only one form of intelligence, and it was fixed through your life. You had a limit on your intelligence. And yet 40 years later, we now know intelligence is linked to epigenetics and different genes being turned on by your environment. So this whole nature versus nurture argument has now spawned 15 or 16 different types of intelligence. And to bring the animals into the conversation, when I first heard about things like equine therapy, so these kind of team building days where you go with horses, I was like, this is snake oil. This is like putting crystals out and changing your vibrations. But actually, animals, including ourselves, we have this kind of radar for non-verbal communication, and horses are prey to a lot of animals. So being able to pick up on those non-verbal cues is something that horses can bring to the party. People do that too. Yeah. In the psychopathy world, we have this. We have these stories about when certain people are in the room. When I'm interviewing Ted Bundy, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. And we've since discovered that certain people can sense psychopathy in others, because we need that kind of radar to know when are we safe or are we not safe. And if that's been proven, it's not beyond the realms of fantasy to think that we're able to pick up on other forms of empathy and other forms of nonverbal communication as well. And some people are more sensitive to those things and more empathic or empathic, and some people are less sensitive to it and maybe more kind of task focused or transactional. So it's a really interesting time in the research world, trying to make sense of all these different intelligences, how they actually all contribute towards a sort of human condition as well. And there is no kind of, if we pull this lever, then suddenly we've got a high IQ or EQ or LQ or MQ, or, before we run out of letters of the alphabet as this research continues.
Yeah, I would argue one of my dogs is better than the other in terms of the instinct. Like, one can always tell when I'm upset, even when none of the humans in the house can. The other one, I think he tries to wind me up more.
But there are benefits. There must be benefits to both. Yeah. So we know for example, your personality, about 40% of it is genetic. Yeah. So if there are personality traits that still stay in a population, then there must be an evolutionary benefit for them being in the population.
Yeah.
So there must be a benefit to psychopathy, for example. There must be a benefit to introversion, or there must be a benefit to agreeableness or low agreeableness. Yeah. And that's why diversity and inclusion is so important from a psychological point of view. Is if you just create an environment that is nothing but high agreeable, empathetic people, then what you'll do is you'll create an environment that's really consensus building and collaborative and full of rapport and all of those lovely, beautiful things that come. But the trade-off is when things go wrong, you become emotionally stretched. You can see passive aggressive behaviors manifest. You can see people not wanting to hold people to account and having tough conversations because the need to belong and conform is more important than kind of putting yourself in psychological harm's way. So we really need to embrace the benefits of high EQ and low EQ. There are benefits to both at certain points. There is no kind of right answer or perfect answer every time.
And I know when... Oh, sorry, Sandra, carry on.
All I was going to say is that I think where I've seen teams transform is the when they've taken a personality profile, for example, and they've got the reassurance of knowing I am what I thought I was, or actually this all sounds right, but I wasn't aware of this type of stuff. But to have the conversation with others who have also got a personality profile that they agree with, and to talk as adults, not the parent or the child, just as adults, knowing that we're celebrating our differences and we're going to manage and we're going to we're going to navigate the differences that we have, because ultimately, if we know we're walking into something and we know what to expect back, as it were. So your profile, I'm talking about insights. You're a fiery red. I'm a cool blue. Naturally, you're more extrovert. I'm more introvert. Typically, I'm not going to be coming to you and only giving you like all the detail, because I know that you only want 2 bullet points and then you need me to buzz off. So again, it's that know thyself, but share who you are and how you operate, so that you can find ways to compromise and to negotiate. I think when conflict happens, a lot of the time when conflict happens, someone is surprised, or they're caught off
Off guard.
Like you're off guard.
Thank you.
On the hoof.
Then any of those, and so they're shocked and surprised, and then that's when the conflict happens, because it was out of character, or I wasn't expecting that, or I don't know what that means. So when you have your self-awareness and you're met with someone who also has the self-awareness, and there's a communication between you, that's when marvelous things happen. More confidence comes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My partner. So in personality psychology, we use a model that has hundreds of dimensions, but they're kind of simplified down to 5. And she has high conscientiousness. So she's very much, she would have done her homework when she was issued it at school. She reads the recipes. She's very kind of structured. High agreeableness. So her in-group and need to please others and keep the peace in the tribe is very high. And neuroticism, which is about emotional stability and over worrying and catastrophizing and things like that, sit in that dimension. Now, when I cook dinner, because I do most of the cooking in our house, it's not unusual for me to stir a pot, lean across, and when I come back, the spoon's gone and she's washed it up. Right? Very, very frustrating. It's also not unusual, because I've done the cooking, she will do the washing up. Because from a conscientious point of view, it's let's get it done and we can enjoy the evening together. From an agreeableness point of view, it's I'll do it because you've done the dinners and I'll help out the tribe. And from the neuroticism point of view, and blended with the agreeableness, is if somebody unexpectedly turns up, what if they think we've got a dirty house? Okay. So she will randomly do these tidy up things. And then one day on a random Thursday, she will blow up out of nowhere that I treat the house like a hotel. Because these little things have built up, but that high agreeableness means that she's not challenged when it was initially a problem. She said things like, I've done the washing up for you, and those kind of passive aggressive statements. And then all of a sudden, out of character comes this blow up. And in organizations, we see that as well, where it's something little that's just been the straw that's broke the camel's back, because people are kind of wired differently to interact with stress and other people's emotions in different ways, and then suddenly you get that's not like Steve, or that's not like Sarah.
It happened to my mum at work, and the woman she works with does makeup on the side, and she was telling me about it, and I went, Mum, what happened the other day? And she went, someone accused me of breaking a drawer at work. She didn't, she joked, and she went, oh, this drawer's broke, was that you, was it, Jan? And my mum went off on one, and she was like, what's this? And my mum went, I don't know, I'm going through the menopause at the moment, and I think everything's all over the place. But she made her cry because the two of them get along really well. And I mean, they sorted it out, but you can appreciate that sometimes it can be difficult to have those conversations with people, right? Because one might, I thought I really upset her, and she thinks she really upset her, and it's hard to sort of come together.
And it sounds like they might both be kind of in-group high agreeable people. If they were low agreeable, it'd be you're dead to me, I'm never speaking, cut you out of my life, take the emotion out of it completely.
Yeah, absolutely.
As I said at the start, it takes many flowers to make a garden.
And And I guess, Sandra, in one of our earlier conversations when we were setting up today, you talked about how can you learn EQ and learning and development teams focusing more on learning EQ over empathy. Why and what might that look like?
So in my experience, empathy is typically packaged as walk a mile in a customer's shoes, imagine that you're the customer and how they must be feeling. And then there's a kind of weird conversation about, oh yeah, they must be feeling annoyed, or they must be feeling frustrated, or yeah, that's all right. That's the common thing that comes up when I talk to people about empathy. But what I've learned in the last 7 or 8 years is that empathy, good empathy, a good experience of empathy, and again, I'm talking about myself here, is when someone holds the space for me. And what that means is they'll ask me some great questions and then they'll let me speak. And they might use some of the language I've used to let me carry on speaking if I've got something to say. Where it's not worked so well is when someone has said to me, oh yeah, my dad had that. Yeah, that's right. Or, oh, I know exactly how you feel. Oh, you must be really frustrated about that. That's not how empathy is. So in my experience, that is putting something on me that I haven't said, and you've tried to guess because you're trying to guess what is going on for me in order to move me on to the next thing. Now, when you practice emotional intelligence, you know what you learn how to know how you're feeling in a particular thing. It's going to take a bit of practice, but you'll get to realize to quite finite detail, I'm feeling that. I wonder why I'm feeling that. I'm feeling that because, and a whole list of reasons why I might be feeling a particular way. And then when I know how I feel, I then choose whether I need to manage that, as in, I better go for a walk around the block because otherwise I'm going to blow a gasket, or I'm just going to breathe a bit here, or actually I'm going to send a note back because that's a really lovely thing I've just read, all that stuff. Now, if you don't know yourself and you don't know what's coming up for yourself, then what you're doing in the process of empathy is what I've learned is that you're second guessing what the other person is thinking. And sometimes you kind of project what it is that you're feeling and you put it on the other person. That is not good. So when you practice emotional intelligence and you know how you're feeling and you're managing your emotions, so, you know, you might be shocked, dismayed, you might be disgusted at what you're just hearing, but you stay calm and you invite the other person to tell you more. And then they will feel that you have really listened and you've really connected and you've been kind and listened well and you've valued that moment in time far more than if you've jumped in with an assumption on how they're feeling. I hope some of that made sense because I did get into a bit of a soapbox moment there, Kerry.
That was a fantastic soapbox, Sandra. And I completely agree that feigned transactional empathy is actually the opposite of empathy. You're not putting yourself in their shoes. You're taking the shoes off them.
Yeah. Oh, isn't that empathy 101? We were taught that in big corporate. I know exactly how you're feeling, Danny. A lot of our customers are feeling the same.
And it's just condescending, isn't it? It's and we can feel that. You know, empathy, emotions for me, I think one of the things that we didn't get taught at school, and we probably should, is that the emotion comes first. Like your body does something physiologically, and then your brain tries to say, what's going on? Why do I feel like this? So my palms are sweaty, my heart rate's racing. What's the context? Because in some context, that's a good response. And in some context, it makes no sense. So your brain tries to make sense of what your body's doing based on the context it's in. And if it's out of context, then suddenly it becomes anxiety or worry or all these other feelings. You can't second guess what somebody else is going through and what the physiological things going on in their body are, let alone the cognitive trying to translate and understand what's going on. So this kind of simplifying it down to a half-day course in your onboarding process or your customer service training to just do there, everything's going to be okay. I've got a friend that's been through that. Just it's very dismissive of other people's emotions.
Yeah. I think. Oh, carry on, Sandra.
No, go ahead, Kerry. I can wait.
No, go. Honestly.
So I've been invited countless times to run empathy training for people, and I'll say, you know, we need short and often. We need to do a bit of this, and then we need to do a bit of a reminder, because ultimately, and you'll know this better than anyone, the pair of you, it isn't a quick fix. It's a habit. It's like, you know, it's setting down new pathways to think a different way. And I've turned down work where someone said, we'll do half a day, because I'm like, this really isn't, this is a tick box exercise.
Not a tick box.
Yeah.
It's a tick box, and actually your staff will feel even worse, because they'll think that you're now expecting them to behave this way when all you've done is highlighted what it is. You haven't given them the opportunity to change some of those neural pathways and to learn the skill of emotional self-awareness and a bit of management, then on to empathy. And that's the thing that drives me nuts, is because empathy for yourself and empathy for others, you know, a lot of people drive themselves really hard. And, you know, this comes back, doesn't it, to burnout and frustration and anxiety in the contact center. We don't honestly think about the process time that people need to just reflect, or to, I mean, some people don't even have enough time to process, or just to reset themselves, or just to, you know, move on to the next thing, to change their energy. And this is one of the things that I've spoken about a few times, where inviting people to just physically move, whether you shake like a zebra or you do a few star jumps or whatever it is, that's meant to disperse the cortisol. I don't know if that's true, Danny, but that's what I've been told, is that, you know, cortisol is a hormone that's all to do with stress. If you can move your body at some type of rate, you're likely to move it around a bit. You might get some other things coming in. That moving your blood around just means that you don't feel quite as like a pressure cooker about to kick off. Yeah.
I've not heard that one before, but that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
I think for me, part of the challenge, and again, I know I keep banging on this kind of self-knowledge, self-awareness piece, but you're designed to be starving. So you're not supposed to grow up in this time of plenty. We're supposed to be on the savannah, scrapping around for our food. So the way that we're kind of wired is very energy efficient. So you might be wired to be on edge and worried and looking for predators. You might be wired to be very detail orientated. You might be wired to be very creative, but you're wired a certain way, and that's what your personality is. It's your sort of default operating system. That doesn't mean you can't do something different. It just takes more cognitive effort, more calories to do it. And when you have to spend more calories, we call that stress. Okay, you will have all, if for the introverts that are watching, you can be public speakers. You can go to the gig and have a great time. You probably just have to drive home with the radio off to get your energy back.
Yeah.
So we can all play out a character by choice. The challenge in organizations is often we are being encouraged or forced or coerced to play out a character consistently.
Yeah.
So it's call after call after call after call, or there's no opportunity for me to use the innovation that I'm naturally wired for, or there's no opportunity for me to use the detail orientated type things I'm naturally wired for. So, and then to add to the perfect storm, we often position things like resiliency training or EQ training as an individual act. It's for you to improve your resilience, or you to improve your emotional intelligence. It's for you to become more fireproof. Meanwhile, the organization hasn't put out any fires, or hasn't given the environment that allows you to get back that cognitive load that you need. And for me, how you get the cognitive load back is different for every individual. So there isn't a one size fits all set of training or set of operational changes, or, you know, let's allow an extra minute on ACW. It's not quite as simple as that. If I pull this lever, this is what happens. So understanding who you are at your core, how your kind of default wiring is, so that you know when you're at your best and what exhausts you, and then working with your organization, with your immediate manager, to see what opportunities are there for me to take a breather. And some people's breather is, I just need to step away for 30 seconds to get reset myself. Other people might be, I need to go and speak to somebody and have a cup of tea because I charge up through gregariousness and social interaction. But it's understanding that when are you at your best and what derails you.
And I guess, what advice would you give to operational leaders, directors who are working with managers, team leaders to reduce the negative impact on frontline agents?
Know themselves. They're people too. So let them stay at their best. I'm working with a client recently whose leadership team are very creative, quite extrovert, quite ambitious, quite focused, which are fantastic traits to have in a challenger brand that's growing. But the blind spots that naturally come with those people is that you don't tend to stop and take stock. So there's a lack of kind of gratitude. There's a lack of recognition for the people that have helped you get there unintentionally, because they're at their best when they're on to the next thing. What's the next thing? So actually the biggest improvements that we're seeing in that organization aren't be less ambitious, and they aren't stop being you. They're be aware that the things that you're great at mean that in your wake, you need to actively stop, take stock, bring people together, because otherwise all of you are going to burn out and you're going to end up on this journey on your own. So leaders, what's your self-awareness? Who are you? When are you at your best, and what derails you?
So I'm not quite. So there's part of me that's idealistic, and there's part of me that's realistic. And I'm just trying to fathom out where to sit on this. So,
what's the ideal, and then we can.
Okay, so I'm going to give you both. So I've got this thing about performance. You've got agents that are working to particular KPIs. They've got measures they've got to hit, and they've been set for a reason, we hope, and they are all connected to the overall performance of the organization. So they're quite stable, they're quite set. And then on this side, you've got the human that is not a machine. And the human doesn't know when it's going to feel vulnerable, or it's going to feel full of energy, and it's going to be smashing the targets, or it's going to be feeling like its parasympathetic system is about to absolutely collapse. It doesn't know. And so I guess the ideal scenario might be that a leader, a team leader, a supervisor can sense when individuals within their organization are feeling the pressure, or it's starting to mount, and then they intervene with something that gives that individual permission to go and do the thing they need to do. So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because there are often in the workplace the heroes who will just keep pushing through, and they'll keep pushing through, and they'll keep pushing through until they drop. You've got those that are frightened to do something for themselves, for fear of reprimand, or fear for being labeled, or fear for something. And there are others who want to ask but aren't quite sure how to ask, or there are others who are just going to go and get off the phone and go and do stuff. So what am I thinking about? I'm thinking, how do organizations think in a way that can sometimes be counterintuitive, that they get a better result, and these other numbers might do the same or better if they give their people some space to come back to reset. And so that's all a bit of a mess. But ultimately, I think there has to be a way where people on the front line are able to put their hand up and say, I need a break now, because if I don't, in an hour's time, I'm going to absolutely lose it. And how do managers and team leaders step in and say, go and take a break a bit earlier, because I'm thinking that was a pretty hard call, right? So just go and do that. Do what you want with all of that. I don't know what to say, but I think there's a justification here, and I don't know how to say it.
I love it. You got a little round of applause in the middle, because it sounds like you said happy bees make tasty honey.
Oh my God.
Danny, on how often I go to say that to my customers in terms of different bits and pieces, because it's literally stuck in my head in terms of the Fergon. Can I just ask a question that sort of builds on that for both of you? And that is the move, obviously, towards remote and hybrid working. Seeing loads of moves back into the office. great. I remember I used to work on a passports, and if you had a particularly tough call because you were just telling someone they were definitely not going on holiday because their post office check and send was not a guaranteed service, they usually got a little bit abusive, and you'd hang up the phone and sit and speak to the person next to you, have a little bit of a debrief. You don't get that when you're working remotely. And I know some people have said that their team have felt almost like it's an invasion of their home when they get those particularly challenging calls working from home. To your point, Sandra, you can't necessarily, as a team leader, have heard somebody going through that call working remotely. How can we emulate or empower agents or something to make it easier for people to communicate these issues when they're working from home? Because I don't think the answer is to go back to the office.
No.
I'm
letting Sandra go because I could talk on this for a long time. And I'm to get my soapbox out. Go on, Sandra.
Yeah. So there are two really very powerful things that I heard from what you just said. So one is the intrusion into your home, and that is a thing. There's no doubt about it. You leave the office, you leave that behind. How you the dirty, whatever you feel from all of that conflict, you can do that. Some people can't even, they're not even in a separate room. It might be in their bedroom, it might be on their kitchen table. How do you separate that? So I think that firstly, having a ritual of putting something away and covering it up and putting it to one side so it is no longer prominent in that space can help. But you're right, it is an invasion. The other point is around, and this is stuff that I know other companies have done. So whether it's a Teams channel or it's a Slack channel, or it's a regular set of checking in, even if it's just half an hour where some fun stuff is done or an exchange of ideas, icebreaker quite equivalents to keep the energy and the connectedness and seeing other people and speaking to them in regular intervals helps. But for me, I think the most successful has been Slack channels where people can have fun, include other things, or be really honest about how they're feeling because it's a protected closed group. But Danny, let's hear from you. I'm all ears.
Yeah. No, again, we find ourselves in solidarity on our advice.
No, so annoying.
Kind of that Pavlovian conditioning of the ring the bell and the dog salivate. If you're taking interactions in your bedroom, then you're going to start to associate and anchor that with your workplace. One of the best things I did was move to this garden office because I don't use it for anything other than work, and it gives me a delineation between the day and it stops work encroaching into my house. And I'm very privileged that I get to choose who I work with, and I love what I do. I can't imagine how tough it would be if I was on the phones dealing with passport queries and having to deal with highly charged emotional conversations all day and then eat my dinner at the same place that I did those. So yeah, absolutely agree, Sandra. There are a couple of recommendations that I would make. Remote working can be hugely successful or awful depending on your intentionality. If you're just lifting and shifting what you did in the office and doing it on Zoom or doing it in your bedroom, then you are missing all of the benefits that remote working brings. So actually, how do you set up things like, it might be a Slack channel, but also the psychological safety around, is it okay to say, I've just had a mare of a call? Or what I've tended to see is coping mechanisms. You start to see dark humor, or another shouting customer, it must be a Tuesday kind of conversations. And we're not actually dealing with the emotions. It's still a form of masking, and it's still just as exhausting. So how do we create the environment where you can be you? So intentionally, how do we have these one-to-one conversations or group conversations to create the trust, to know that I've got your well-being at my heart, that I care about what you're doing, rather than it just being we just send each other memes and GIFs on Slack. And that comes from the leader needs to go first. The leader needs to model their own vulnerability. They don't necessarily have to broadcast all of the challenges that they have in their life, but the sort of shared trauma that we all have in work, I don't see any issue with that. But if you pretend to be a Superman or a Superwoman, then you're just going to get people that aren't comfortable in sharing when they're having a tough day. And we all have tough days. So how do you do things intentionally? How do you give people space, whether that's space virtual or whether it's in person? How do you create intentional spaces so that people can be more them?
There's one little example that I'd like to add in as well. So my partner works in IT. His boss is over in Athens. His work colleague is over in Turkey. Most of America is like talking to him about stuff. And he has this phenomenal relationship with a manager who has a one-to-one with him. And the majority of the call is, how you doing? The targets and the things to do and the tactical transactional stuff gets covered, but mostly this woman holds the space for my partner to just talk about whatever he wants to talk about. And she'll share some stuff. And that seems, again, counterintuitive. Well, it's a waste of time, isn't it? Just finding out how they're doing. Come on, they'll tell me if they've got a problem. No, they won't. But they will if you know that you're entering a conversation, which is a little bit about the technical stuff, but mostly it's about who you are, how you are, and what's going on for you. And so I wonder if the guys listening in to this recording or this live broadcast will consider the next one-to-one. And it's going to be a bit weird at first if they haven't done it before. But you might want to say, I'm going to change the format of these one-to-ones. And I want to know a bit more about how you're getting on. This isn't about me doing any performance review or nothing's going on there. I just want to change it up a bit. We still need to cover this stuff, but I just want to open it up. I wonder what would happen.
Yeah. And I'd add to that, how can you ask for advice? As the leader, how can you ask for advice? What do you need help with? Because it's a one-to-one. It should be contributing from both sides, including what do you need help and support with. Often one-to-ones turn into ones. You've done this, you explain your performance, explain your behaviors. But for me, the best team leaders in the contact centers are the ones that have an emotional, personal connection with their people. They know what's going on in their life. They know their partner's name, their dog's name. When they do recognition, it's not just an Argos gift voucher. I've been and changed that for a football training skills because I know that Kerry is huge into her women's football, because it's important that I see her, that I recognize her.
That's
and
right.
Those things, they cost the same, but the value is so much more.
And those are the most memorable people. Like, there was a guy, he was my team leader, Imran. He worked at Ashby Teleperformance, and still every person who I've ever spoken to that has worked at Ashby Teleperformance remembers Imran. And he used to do loads of good stuff, like when he went and he got married in India, and he brought in this huge photo album of their day and their weeks and talked to us about all of the traditions and stuff. And those things matter, right? Some people think, hey, they're oversharing, but you're really thinking, hey, I know this person. I know them really well. They care to share with me.
Yeah.
It's their love language.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a couple of comments here, actually. A lot of them here. The point Danny Wareham made highlights the value of using DISC workplace behavior preference reports to help
I don't want to touch on DISC. So there is a snobbery in psychology around how accurate tools are.
Yeah.
I don't really mind if you use tarot cards or horoscopes. It's not about whether you're a red or a blue. It's not about whether you're ENTJ. It's the conversation that's encouraged afterwards. So if you want to believe that certain tools are accurate or a true reflection of you, I know everybody is more than just a red with a bit of blue in it. You are far more complex than that. But if it drives quality conversations afterwards of, that's why I'm more analytical and this is how it manifests and how does it make a difference, then yes, some behavioral tools like Bell-Bing and MBTI and so on, and DISC, etc., they're useful as a conversation starter, and you should absolutely take advantage of every conversation you can.
Do you know, one of my customers who was a head of talent was actually embarrassed when she did her personality profile, and it showed that she was red, quite red, with some green and some blue. And some of the leadership were really embarrassed when they got green.
So I am technically an extrovert. If you to test me in one of these Jungian models, I'm an extrovert, but actually I'm not very social and I'm not demonstrative. I choose to be more social and demonstrative because they're learned behaviors. And if, as a public speaker, if I don't enthuse others with my energy, the message is going to land flat. So these tools are useful, but they're not the whole of you. And the conversation is where the magic happens, not in the label.
Yeah. And Amechi put DISC is designed as a conversation tool.
Yeah.
And then there's just a few other bits in terms of this one's an interesting one. It is a home intrusion. We need to put in place boundaries that working in an office used to provide. And are you saying, Sandra, that for as leaders, we should just be encouraging people to say, put things away, put whatever you use as work equipment away, set it to the side, or what's the practical ask for that for people working from home?
Yeah, you know, if you can, I've worked with a lot of people who have their computers in their bedrooms and they put a cover over them, or they lay the screen down so it doesn't stand out as much. I mean, really, whatever works for you. I think there's an interesting ritual about setting yourself up for work as part of the getting ready to do your work, but others might not have the time for that or not be inclined. They just want to crack on. But I think if you have visual cues, like, well, there's the computer again, where I just had that really dreadful phone call. You know, again, you know, Danny will know better than I on this, but I think it does change the energy. It changes the mood in the house, in the room. So even if, and I do this, opening the windows and all the doors, getting myself out of it, feeling like the air is recirculated a bit, helps me psychologically if I've had a bit of a tough time. So it's whatever anyone individually feels comfortable with. But I guess the invitation here is to try whatever technique works for you ultimately.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be a physical boundary. It's what's your routine. And Sandra alluded to, we tend to have a routine to start work. So I'm going to park in this parking space and I'm going to get a vanilla latte and I'm going to sit at this. I'm going to put my headphones on and I'm going to get the beep before I get the call. Have a routine for the end of the day. Yeah. If that's cover your computer, great. If it's change out of your school uniform because it feels like the end of it, fine. If it's go and make dinner, or my approach is I go and stand on, I've got a deck outside. So I go and stand on there literally for a couple of minutes and just survey the school fields and stuff. And that's we call it context switching. So it's a form of pattern interruption. But whatever your process is, you don't, especially when you're working remote, you don't have the opportunity to decompress on the travel home. So how do you just do something, but make that your routine? And it can be a 30-second routine. Doesn't matter what it is, as long as you do it consistently, it will separate your work from your home.
And I've got one little thing here from a LinkedIn. Opening up one's thing, creating a truly safe space is another. I mean, we've all seen the examples. I had one personally where I had told my boss something in confidence. I got a Teams meeting for the next day, and all of a sudden he was not on a call by himself, but with his boss too, in a twofer scenario. And I was told that actually what I shared had been shared with their boss and they were going to tell me off about it. What's the key to really...
And were you going to ever share anything again?
Me personally, yes, I went mad on the call. The fact that they had dared to do that to me.
I've seen
I think
surveys,
I clicked off.
I've seen staff surveys that are anonymous, where there has been an awful lot of investment after the results are out to try and find who said such and such.
Oh, they did it with us. What team do you work in? What gender are you? Are you a parent? It was basically, this is anonymous, but we are going to find you.
All of these kind of microaggressions send such powerful messages that this is not a safe place.
That's right.
This is I want to find who's responsible for this blame culture. So I don't know who LinkedIn user is because the security settings, but truly is the important bit there. And if it's you go first, then how can you really think that this is truly a safe place? So leaders have to lead by example. They have to travel the road first.
And I think that very often I'm told, well, I've created this safe space, so it's safe. And I try and invite that person to think the safety can only ever be in the mind of the other person. You can do a certain amount, but ultimately what goes on for them is what goes on for them. So I guess LinkedIn user, perhaps some of the things we need to think about is consistency of behavior. Doing the thing that you said you were going to do. It's often as simple as that. You have to be the reliable, predictable type of human being that doesn't do random stuff that is completely off the wall and a bit kind of like completely out of character for me to want to trust you. Because if I know roughly what you are, and you've done all the things that you said that you do, and you showed up on time when you said, all these little tiny things all stack up to, I'm going to be more likely to tell you something, because I know who you are roughly, and you've not dropped a ball so far, from the whole doing what you say you're going to do. And it's only over time, when you build that, you can start to invite people to share. And if they perceive you to be safe and the space to be safe, then they might give you a little bit. Or if they give you quite a bit, for goodness sake, don't blow it.
No, I was going to say, it's really hard. Trust is one of those things, right? It's really difficult to build. Actually, once you have it, you have it. But like that, and it's gone. Like in that moment, I knew I didn't trust either of mine. And
just
maybe that's why I'm self-employed.
And just to build slightly on Sandra's, that doesn't mean that the leader has to be perfect at everything.
Absolutely.
One of my best friends, I could share anything with, any of my problems. We're really close in that way. I will not lend him money because I know it's not coming back.
That's like my sister.
Yeah, and everybody has these idiosyncrasies that make us human. Everybody has their kind of foibles and pitfalls. So I know that money is not safe with him. It's not coming back. It's a donation. It's not a loan. And leaders can be the same. You can be really safe around, if you need to open up around these sorts of things. And my consistent behaviors that I show demonstrate that is a safe environment for that particular thing. But it doesn't mean that you have to open up about everything all the time to that person. Safety is in the eye of the beholder. We all experience the world differently. There is no psychological safety. That's something you determine. There is no open door policy. That's something you determine whether it's an open door. Absolutely.
And we've got some great feedback. And would you believe, guys, we have made it over an hour. Feels like we probably started about 10 minutes ago. And I know Sandra has some resource prepared that she's going to hand out. So if people are interested in that, Sandra, do you want to pop your email in the comments, or as to add it onto there somewhere, or to collate and maybe get some sales meetings about synergies, which we all know Danny enjoys. That's what he enjoys the most.
It's the word,
in his inbox.
I'm not sure that I can add anything into the comments in this.
We'll do it in the event. We'll do it in the event.
And I'll add it in terms of those. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us here. If you enjoyed the conversation, feel free to share. There will be a recording of this that stays on LinkedIn forever. And because I am in the modern world, I will stick it on now my YouTube channel. So thank you so much for the conversation. Thank you, Sandra and Danny, for your time. And see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.